Welcome to the Conference Championship Playoff Recap here at the 16th season of Blood, Sweat, and Beers. What would you honestly say your interest level is outside of the two teams that are now fighting for the championship? Other than Don Chris and AA Ron, what's your level of interest in the games? Are you interested in the outcome? Could you not care less about any of it? Are you still following the scores and the players? I always enjoy not just football, but the stats. I like the numbers, and so I follow it pretty closely, even once I'm no longer vying for that championship. But I feel like on the flip side of that coin, H2 probably hasn't cared for several weeks. So where do you rank? Still following semi-closely or just waiting to see what the end result is? Kind of curious. As we look back at the second round of the playoffs, what amounted to the conference championships, just happened to turn out that way. We see that AA beat AB. He's able to squeeze out just enough points to continue. I wouldn't call it a run through the playoffs, not scoring a ton of points, but just enough. At 7-7, got himself in. And, well, he's just been able to work his way steadily through the playoff bracket and finds himself, looking for his third championship, his third Pilsner to tie Keith as our winningest team. So we'll see what Aaron brings next week. Now, AB, so much to say here. Before we get into all those details, let's take a look at the potential scores and the pops. Neither team did very well. In fact, surprisingly poor, except for the fact that read option was relatively poor in percentage of perfection on the season. Bottom third, second fewest points scored. So there are a lot of points left on the bench week over week. The 10-4 record likely was an anomaly. It was likely very misleading. Just happened to score the right number of points against the players who struggled each week. That's not a recipe for long-term success, and I mentioned that 2 months ago. I have personal experience in that. You never want to go into the playoffs only having won because no one scored against you, because that will come to an end at some point. And unfortunately, it did in his first playoff game. But again, it shouldn't be that surprising. Low percentage, low points scored. In fact, as we look back, no one ever scored more than 150 points against read option. And only once did someone break 140 until the very last week of the season. The very last week of the season, he had already locked everything up. And so it didn't really make much of a difference. So it was an interesting season going forward. He did manage it well enough to stay several games ahead. He ended up winning the division by 3 full games, which is rather impressive. And yet the style in which he did not translate into playoff success. And so even though it was the number 2 team that in the West that he played, he didn't bring quite enough points. He had plenty of points on the bench. I appreciated the fact that both benches in this game had over 100 points. Either one of them, you see the potentials there, either one of them could have scored 15, 20, 30 more points easily. We know the Jonathan Taylor incident that Billy will surely be ruining for the rest of the season, probably through the rest of the offseason. And as many times as we bring it up next season, he will probably be frustrated at that choice. So, Aaron, see you in the championship game next week. Now, our second game that mattered, this was a fun one. Hottest team coming in over the past couple of weeks, Booger Pickers. Didn't quite hit 100, but certainly lived up to the billing. Almost didn't hit 180. I apologize. That was a misspeak. Didn't hit 180, but 170 was absolutely enough. And there were points left on the bench, and Mr. Snuffy gave it his best. When he made the comment, he felt like he did the best he could with his roster or with his team. That is objectively accurate, because throughout the year, he was constantly over 90% to a perfect roster. Dropped a couple hundreds on us. 100%, perfect rosters. Never once did he fall below an 80%. Ended the regular season with the best percentage to perfect rosters on average over the 14 weeks. And so he clearly gave his best. In fact, if you look at what could have been, he dropped another 100% on us. Everything, he squeezed out every last possible point he could have. The 155 wasn't enough. Booger Pickers has some hot players coming in, and unfortunately for Mr. Snuffy, he'll have to put the D word back on the shelf until next year. But appreciate the effort all year long, always riding at the top. Again, tied for the best record, most points scored, best percentage of a perfect roster on average every single week. Well done, Mr. Snuffy. That was a good season for you. We will see the Booger Pickers in the championship game. The rest of the games, well, they didn't really matter. Your commish versus Puzzles was the game that made zero difference whatsoever. They will now play for 5th and 6th place, 5th or 6th place in this week. So this past week made no difference whatsoever. As we look at the consolation ladder, that made a little bit of a difference because Jersey Birds and Poncho, because they won, they cannot come in last place. They're fighting for 7th and 8th place. Whoop-de-doo. However, the other interesting game will be Pet Detectives and Hoffman. Augustus Gloop 9. I'm already thinking of new names. I'm already thinking of suggestions. And I trust that either one of our teams in the championship, Ron, great name change this year. Booger Pickers, fairly engaged and experienced the joy, the ups and the downs of the weekly name change. I trust that either one of you will be a little more responsible with the name change next year. So I have a sneaking suspicion Augustus Gloop 9 will be no more, at least for one season. Anyway, we'll have to see. We'll have to see if Hoffman steps back in and takes the helm, or if he lets his ship just remain rudderless, floating about the ocean, carried hither and thither. This is getting out of control. Enjoy the championship week.